Hello everybody, this is my first ever video on YouTube, and for the first video, I'm going to be talking about the weapons in Rage 2. The first weapon that I want to talk about is the pistol. You start off with it pretty early in the game, or should I say immediately when you get into the game. It's quite useful later on in the game, and with the included upgrades that you can get, it gets even stronger. Now, there are a couple things that you want to know about this weapon before you start playing the game with it quite frequently. Number one, it's better if you headshot people, because it's close to a one-shot if you zoom in, because that is its more damage kind of firing mode. But if you zoom out, then it turns into a burst weapon. It fires 3 bullets, to be exact, and once zoomed in, it transforms those 3 bullets into one high damage dealing bullet. With the upgrades that you can add on to this weapon, there's a lot that you can do, especially later on in the game when you're fighting the Authority which have close to no armor at all. The pistol is really good against them, because not only can you just one-shot headshot them, but you can also waste minimal ammo on them, because they only take 1 or 2 bursts or 1 shot to the head with your high caliber round. May I just say that this weapon is amazing in overdrive mode, because not only does it increase the fire rate in its high caliber mode, but it also turns the bullets into flaming bullets. Now, if you're wondering, no, it does not deal any fire damage, or it does not catch them on fire if you go into overdrive mode, but I'd just like to say that because it deals much more damage. And may I just say, this weapon in its overdrive mode is even better than the AR in its overdrive mode. And to say that is quite the accomplishment for a beginner weapon, because most games you just grab a weapon out of the blue and just have it for the rest of the game and you do nothing with it, because it deals close to no damage probably. But nope, not this pistol, because you actually use it quite frequently throughout the game than you expect. Also, you can use this weapon in combination with other weapons as well, that, let's say, just launch them up in the air, or even some abilities. But overall, I would give this weapon, for a beginner weapon, around a 7 out of 10. And that's actually really good for a beginner weapon. Now, our next weapon is the AR. Now, this weapon is very reliable. If there, let's say, is a horde of enemies, let's say a bunch of mutants coming after you, this weapon can get the job done. It has a high DPS and a high rate of fire, so it can just shred through those mutants like butter. Now, this weapon is the same as the pistol. It has a lot of great upgrades that you can get, and they're all great. My personal favorite is the armor piercing upgrade, which increases its damage, and it can pierce armor, which is very helpful later on in the game. Not only that, but the weapon is also handy later on in the game just by itself, because if you're doing the first mission for Marshall to go down in the sewers, there will be a lot of mutants down there, and as I said earlier, it can shred through them. And this weapon is also great as a defensive weapon, not an offensive weapon that much, because its range is also quite good as well. Now, the range is actually the most interesting part that I want to talk about this weapon, because you see auto rifles as up close and personal and just demolishing through enemies very close to them. This weapon is a bit different, because this weapon has a scope on it for a reason. It can also penetrate through enemies if you're lucky. But honestly, the most frustrating thing that I find about this weapon is that the developers didn't put a secondary fire on this. But the scope is still pretty good, and I would say that it's still a good call. But what I think they should have added in as the secondary fire, let's say just multiple rounds, so it's kind of like a scatter shot, or some sort of 3-round burst, or high damage dealing caliber round, just like the pistol. But overall, I think this weapon deserves quite a good rating, slightly because of its viability through the armor penetration and high damage dealing of it. So overall, I would think this weapon is good for medium armored enemies, and I would give this weapon around a 7.5 out of 10. This is going to be the third weapon on our list, and this is the shotgun. One of my favorite weapons in the whole entire game. And also maybe one of the coolest weapons, because the alternate firing mode on this gun sprouts these vents from the sides of it and turns the regular shotgun into a ground-pounding gravity cannon. And also this weapon is mostly used for the shield guys with the goon squad, but also it's used for long range as well, because this is the slug firing mode with the shotgun. The upgrades for this gun are really useful in most things in this world. For example, my favorite upgrade for this gun is probably the rate of fire upgrade, because when there are a horde of enemies, you can just plow through them with this upgrade. As you can see from the gameplay right now, I am using that because it is the most useful thing that comes with this weapon. Now, the overdrive for this weapon already includes the rapid fire upgrade, but with the rapid fire upgrade, it does absolutely nothing. It just keeps it as it is. But also, it turns these bullets into flaming bullets as well as AR and the pistol. I have about talked about most things about this shotgun, and I have no more to talk about, so it's time to get into the rating. I would say this weapon gets a 9 out of 10. That's how good it is. This is the fourth weapon on our list, and it is going to be one of the strongest weapons in the game, the rocket launcher. Now, the reason why I'm saying the strongest is quite obvious, because it is a rocket launcher and it can kill most regular enemies in one hit, including the melee. Now, this weapon is really helpful against the big bosses, especially when you're in this one area and you're stuck with a big boss and maybe some additional enemies, but it can just melt the boss's overall health. The secondary fire for this weapon is absolutely incredible. What you can do is you can lock on to different enemies, and those enemies will be targeted by your rocket launcher and split one big rocket into multiple little rockets that deal quite the same amount of damage. I suggest when there is a big boss in front of you, lock onto him before you shoot anything, because as I said, the little rockets deal just as much damage and maybe even a little more. Who really knows? But the overdrive for this weapon is absolutely crazy. It can just demolish anything in your way, especially just regular enemies. Now, what it does is it transforms one of those big rockets into all the small rockets, and it deals just as much damage, and you have a higher fire rate, and you can demolish many more enemies than you could before. Other than that, that seems like all that I should talk about, or all that I have to talk about for now, so let's give it a rating. For this much of an amazing gun, I would rate this weapon a full 8 out of 10 because of its amazing stats. Not only does it have high DPS and high damage, but it's just amazing. Other than that, on to the next weapon. Now this will be our fifth weapon on the list, and it will be one of the greatest, the Firestorm Revolver. Not only is it powerful enough at the beginning of the game with no enemies, with no armor, but it can just burn so many enemies at once, especially mutants. The reason why I'm saying especially mutants is because they have close to no armor, and they will always be weak and come in packs, and that means that you can burn many simultaneously. Also, one of the coolest features about this weapon is that when you shoot enemies, it doesn't deal that much damage, so that's why the secondary fire is not really a secondary fire. It just, as you can see from the gameplay, when you shoot somebody, and then you can snap your fingers, and then you can burn them. And let me just say, with its mastery ability, which is it lets the enemies burn for a longer time, it is even more powerful than ever, because then you can have more burning time for the enemies, and then that damage over time will become more and more and more powerful. And don't even get me started on the overdrive. It's just so overpowered that you don't even need to do that snapping motion anymore. It just turns the bullets into the balls of fire that you have when you snap your fingers. And it just explodes on impact. Even though the bullet time is a bit slower, it still gets the job done with a lot of enemies. And with the overdrive, you no longer really need to do anything. And you don't need to snap your fingers anymore, so it just explodes on impact. And not only that, but it does more damage on impact than the fire motion. So that's why it just burns them for 1 second, and then it actually burns them, and then they're dead. That seems like all that I should talk about this weapon. So let's get into the rating. Yeah. This weapon has done well in various tests in this peak, and I suggest this weapon you should use it against low to medium armored enemies. If they're high armored enemies, just don't try to use it, because you won't deal that much damage to them, because first you need to get through their armor, and then you should use the Firestorm Revolver. But overall, I would give this weapon a full 8.5 out of 10. And that's really good for a pistol. Okay, so this is our 6th weapon on this list, and it will be the hyper cannon. And it's basically like a Gauss rifle in any other game, but it's still really cool, and it's really strong. Its secondary fire is where you zoom in and it kind of charges up the shot so you can penetrate through different enemies, and maybe you can get a collateral. Who knows? Now, from my experience from Rage 2, I have only gotten 1 or 2 collaterals, so it's still really hard, but I suggest if you're trying to go for them, go for the mutant nests, because they're always crowded beside each other, and it's just so easy to get a collateral shot right there. Now, enough about that. The upgrades for this weapon are actually really interesting, and one of them is that you can pierce armor. Originally, I think that this should already be integrated inside of the weapon, because first of all, it's a Gauss cannon, and second of all, it's super high powered. That even one of the upgrades is that if you shoot a target with a full powered shot, then you can just completely annihilate them and explode them, which chains on to other targets if they're near. Which I think is really cool and powerful, because it is. See, if you're in the mutant nests, then that explosion can just chain on to another and another mutant again and again. So you can eventually just annihilate the whole row. And as you can see, the accuracy on this thing is just amazing. But here's the thing. Even though you can aim in on it, it doesn't mean that it has that much of a range. And the farther your enemy is, the harder it is to hit them. Now, I'm not just saying that because from longer range it's harder to hit people originally. It's because the bullets from this weapon thin over time. And over time, I mean over range. But coming up in this next scene right about here, the overdrive for this is actually just the fully powered thing, just always shooting. Let's say that you have a long distance enemy, and you want to shoot him, and you also have overdrive, and there are more people around him. Then it technically gives you a fire rate upgrade and the fully charged upgrade, which increases your fully charged, but instead of you zooming in, you can still zoom in, but even if you zoom out, it's still the charged up shot just by itself. Which, is really cool, and it's powerful enough that even in a mutant nest, if they're all crowded together, let's say 12, you will still keep that that weapon mastery upgrade, aka the enemies exploding and chaining onto other enemies, that is really, really helpful there, because you can just shoot over and over and over again. And I highly suggest, once you get this weapon, immediately upgrade it and get the extended magazine upgrade, because originally this weapon only has 3 shots, and what fun are you gonna have of that when you can just have 6 shots? I think I've talked a bit too much about this weapon, so it's time to get into the rating. Now, I really like this weapon. It's powerful and it has a lot to it, so I would give this weapon a 9.5 out of 10. Now, this will be the second to last weapon that we will be doing, and it is the charged pulse cannon. This is like your typical machine gun weapon in any of your games. It's powerful, it has an overheat rate, and it can just demolish. But the one thing that's different about this machine gun is that you want it to overheat, because the more it overheats, the stronger it gets. Now, on the gameplay, do you see that kind of red line that I'm passing right now? Yeah, and that part that pops up from the machine gun, that makes the weapon more powerful. So you actually want that to happen. And there's an upgrade that you can get, I think it's the second one, that actually makes the normal time shorter, so you have more time to for the overheat, as you can see right now. So yeah, this weapon is cool and all, and it's fancy, but wait till you see its overdrive. So as you can see from the footage, the gun just completely morphs into something else, and now it's always overheated. But here's the thing, it can't completely overheat, so it's technically like you can have infinite ammo, and you can have the maximum amount of damage that you need. Anyway, I think I've talked quite a bit about this weapon, so I think we should get into the rating. How about you guys? I'm just joking, I can't hear you, so we're just gonna go to the rating anyways. Now, the score that I'm going to put on this weapon is actually going to be quite high for a reason, because of its high damage, because of its incredible designing, and its just overpoweredness. So, the rating I'm going to give it is a 9 out of 10. And that's because of all the things that I said about it. It's great, it's fascinating, and it's everything that you need in this game. Now, a quick disclaimer for this next part. The reason why I'm making it so short is because I died in the clip, and I don't want to show the whole thing, and plus it's short in the first place. Okay, so this is our final weapon on the list, and it is called the gravdart gun. It is actually one of the most fun weapons to use, but it's not really effective. I mean, if you still want to have fun with things, as you can see in the footage, it's actually quite strong if you have a lot of upgrades on it, but in its base form, it's decent. Now, I don't exactly know all of the upgrades for this weapon, but this weapon I think was mostly meant for kind of like a messing around weapon, or not really a serious weapon. So this weapon is kind of just like when you want to mess around with the game. And really all this overdrive does for this weapon is just increase the force of the connection to the portal with the darts, and it just increases the fire rate. So not that much with this gun, really. Now, since this weapon doesn't have too much to talk about, I think this is actually a good time to start the rating on this weapon. So overall, this weapon is kind of like a fun weapon to use. I really don't mind using it either. It's just, when you want to have actual fun with the game. So overall, I would rate this weapon a 5 out of 10. The reason why I'm rating it like that is because it's not really a serious weapon, and you can't really use it in most situations. I mean, if you want, you can launch them off a cliff, and then they would die immediately. But who knows? Maybe they'll add a patch to it or something. You guys may disagree with me in the comments, but I hope this video has been good, and I hope everybody has enjoyed it. So if you did, leave a like and comment down below what I missed and what I did wrong, and I will see you all in the next video that I make. Bye!